it was a bit like sort of watching black mold in your bathroom. You see that picture with David Cameron there instead of the Prime Minister, and you first don't quite register what's going on. And then you realise, oh my God, there is, he's not there. Or rather, it's a bit like the black mold. The black mold is there. I never knew we had this problem. The Prime Minister didn't show up. And then for a brief second, I thought, is this an old picture? And it was Vice President Biden who was there. And who's that man, Olaf Scholz, in the middle? And then you realise what's going on. How would you explain this extraordinary, absence, especially when Normandy is the embodiment of a joint effort? NATO was born in the blood-soaked sands of Normandy, and NATO is necessary now more than it has been perhaps ever. And he wasn't there for that part of it.
So this is something. It's very interesting. It's a massive mistake. It reveals a lack of judgment on his part, huge lack of judgment also on the part of his staff and aides. I was talking to people in the immediate aftermath who were like, even if Rishi Sunak made the wrong decision, why did other people not catch it? I mean, one of the things I talk about in Politics on the Edge is the way in which you're surrounded by staff, aides, advisors. I would expect, the policeman to tell me, or the driver to tell me, somebody to say, oi, this is a really bad look. You don't want to be doing this.
But the policeman or the driver, or maybe even the young advisor, wouldn't have the guts to tell you that. And the one person who should have the guts, Lord Cameron, didn't, astonishingly. Or perhaps he really wants to be in that picture. You never know.
Well, no, that's an interesting idea too. I mean, it's possible that they had a conversation and David Cameron said, don't worry, I've got this. I'm very happy to go out and be photographed with Biden and Macron and preside, and you can go back and do the interview. I've got this handled. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
And also then to go back and do that interview and to politicize, to accuse people of politicizing his absence while issuing the apology, when the purpose of that interview is to double down on something which had been proven to be wrong anyway, the £2,000 that he kept bringing up during the debate. I mean, it just seems extraordinarily ill-advised on every level.
Well, yeah, so I think what we're looking at is the collapse of the Conservative Party, but it's a slower collapse. I mean, I think the beginning of the collapse began with the election of Boris Johnson, because he was not a serious figure. And so he undermined. I mean, the Conservative Party's got a lot of problems. Obviously, I was a Conservative MP and I should be frank about them. But traditionally, the way in which Conservative Party campaigned against Labour is by suggesting that they were more sort of serious. Labour more compassionate, more loving, but the Conservatives were going to look after your money. They were going to be more like a sort of reliable bank manager. And of course, from 2019 onwards, they've blown that completely. They brought in Boris Johnson, who was manifestly unfit to be Prime Minister, a kind of comical, dishonest buffoon. And then they really lost it with Liz Truss, because that was the point at which people felt, well, we can't even trust them with our money. I mean, look at this, is reckless, it's lacking prudence. And Rishi Sunak is part of this story. It's a part of a story, the way in which the Conservative Party lost its way. It ceased, it lost its values, I think, because this is part about losing its values in the way that it thought about its leaders, but also ultimately the way in which it thought about being a serious government.
You write a lot about that in your book, Politics on the Edge. And I wonder whether that losing its way is down to the fact that it just got obsessed with some ideological issues, that it became obsessed with ideology, which is a very, you could argue, un-Tory thing to do, or whether it's the actual process of government, how Number 10, how Whitehall work, or is it a bit of both?
It's that, and it's also our culture, partly our media, partly voters. What really happens is that these parties, and this is the risk facing Labour, I think it's certain now that Labour will be the next government, in my view anyway. The risk facing all of them is that we're in a culture now that puts campaigning ahead of government. What really matters is getting votes. And so why are they choosing Boris Johnson? They're choosing him because they think he can get some votes. It's not that they think he's going to be a good prime minister, that he's going to make good decisions around the country well. Why are they going for Liz Truss? Well, because that sort of ideological radicalism appealed to a kind of rump of the Conservative Party. And the common thread running through, why are they, to my horror, announcing an idea on national service, which could be a good idea, done properly, works in Norway, but why announce it in the middle of an election campaign when you guarantee that Labour's going to reject it? And why not implement it when you're in office? You got 14 years in office. Why didn't you do it then? And the answer is that that's a classic example. It's the way in which you're not sitting down and saying, wow, this is an amazing country facing very big problems. What are the serious, thoughtful decisions I can make over the next 20 years? You're playing games all the time. The politics has become a game, and it's become a sort of horse race of promotion.
It's a bit like chucking spaghetti against the wall to see which noodle sticks, and some of them stick and some of them don't stick. But I guess the metric here is what plays well in the Daily Mail or the Express or indeed the opinion polls. And that's, that's a hiding for nothing, isn't it? I just wonder what you think any party, whether it's the Tories or the Labour Party or the Lib Dems, or indeed Reform UK, what any party could do in order to actually bring out the good stuff in this country that has got lost in recent years.
So three things I think that you could do. One is that we need to reform our planning system very quickly to build some infrastructure. It's extraordinary that we seem to be completely unable to build houses, roads, rail. And that's what levelling up is going to be all about. How do you get that train line between Leeds and Manchester? Second thing, you've got to be brave about harnessing AI. The biggest productive opportunity for Britain is artificial intelligence. Going to lead to challenges in the workforce, but it's also the way that you could transform the NHS, bring growth, bring productivity back. Third thing, you should rejoin the European Union Customs Union. That's not rejoining the European Union, right? It's not getting back into the Parliament of politics, but that's trade. And that's what's will get the investment in and the economy going again.
Do you think that Labour will try and do that if they have a comfortable majority, or are they too afraid to touch that in the first Parliament?
I'm afraid they're not being brave. I think that's the problem. All the three things I've mentioned, a government could do, but I'm afraid Labour's not likely to do it. Look, let's just take the idea of transforming the NHS. Are they going to be brave enough to take on the junior doctors? Are they going to be brave enough to take on unions? Because the challenge is, there are a lot of very hardworking, wonderful people in the NHS, but it's currently costing 4 out of every 10 pounds of current expenditure from the government. And it's just going to go up and up and up as we get older. The only way that you're really going to be able to deliver good public services is through reform. And reform is tough. It's unpopular. It takes a lot of courage.
What do you think of the prospect, the possibility of Nigel Farage winning in Clacton and then defecting to the Tory party and possibly taking on a very senior position in your former party or the party that you represented in Parliament?
I think there's a decent chance he could win in Clacton, and I think he would like to do that. But I think it's largely still talk. But but you've got a serious point there behind it, which is that the Conservatives are going to lose, and there will be parts of the Conservative Party, Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, Liz Truss, who will try to say the reason we lost is we were not right-wing enough. We need to be more like Farage. We need to be proper right-wing populists. That'll be a big mistake. In fact, the way to win an election in Britain is to win back the centre ground. That's where most of the voters are. The Conservatives now only have a lead in people over 65. This is very, very dangerous for the long future of a party because, sadly, people over 65 have an end to them. If you can't get younger people voting for you, you have no future.
So you've got people like Nigel Farage or people in his spirit, getting into dominant positions in the Tory party. You could say the Tory party is defected to Nigel Farage in many ways. And then people like you and many others who have left frontline politics or even backbench politics. Do you ever regret that? Have you, by leaving Parliament, by not trying to win your seat again, have you ceded the ground to the kind of people you dislike so much?
It's a very difficult question, and you're right to raise it, and I worry about it. But in reality, it's more difficult than that, because if I had chosen to stay on in Conservative politics, I would have had to, because this is a team sport, go out on television stations defending Boris Johnson, defending a hard Brexit. You know, there's not an option of being a Tory MP and sitting there kind of sniping away on the back benches. So I had to decide, has the party crossed the red line beyond which I can't follow? And for me, Boris Johnson and a hard Brexit was that line. Now, other people disagree, but I thought, I can't do this. I can't go on your studio and defend him spending all this money on wallpaper or doing his Partygate and all that stuff.
So what's the future of the centre-right in British politics?
It slightly depends what Labour does. But I think if we get ourselves into a situation in which Labour doesn't manage to be brave, doesn't manage to fix the problems of the country over the next 5 years, then I think a huge space will open up in the centre ground for people who see the world in the way that I do.
Under which banner? Under which party political banner?
It's a big question, Matt, because you've got to add to that also that we've got a first-past-the-post election system that doesn't really help new parties coming in.
Well, that is it. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And we know how difficult it is. You know, Anna Soubry, case in point, of setting up a new party that doesn't make it.
Exactly. You can easily get encouraged by people coming up to you and saying, I'm sure many former MPs do, you know, I wish you were in charge, you should set up a new party. But I ran as an independent to be mayor of London, and I just experienced how tough that was, how difficult it is to raise the money, how difficult it is to build the party system, how difficult it is to get the vote out if you're not Labour or Conservative.
Who's Rory Stewart going to be voting for in a couple of weeks' time?
I'm in a muddle on that, Matt. I'm a real muddle. I think the Conservatives have done enough. I don't want to see them remain in government, but I also don't want the Conservative Party to disappear. I think it's healthy for a country to have a strong opposition, and I want the centre-right of the party to survive. So if I was in another constituency where Conservatives I respect are standing, you know, Alex Chalk and Cheltenham, Victoria Prentice, I'd be voting for them, but I'm not in their constituency. So what usually happens, Matt, is I go into the booth, my finger sort of wavers over Labour, and then I kind of wimp out and end up going with the Lib Dems or Greens as a protest.
You're going to hold your nose and vote for the Lib Dems or the Greens. Okay, Rory Stewart, author of Politics on the Edge, a memoir from within, out and paperback this week. Thank you very much. And of course, I should not forget, co-host of The Rest is Politics. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.